My name is Billie Grace, middle-aged computer professional in New York City. 8 years ago, I had gone through some interesting times in my life and decided to pursue this sort of long-standing question about my gender identity. So way back then, here in New York City, the Center for the LGBT folk was hosting gender identity clinics. And so I started going to these group meetups and meeting folks and getting a sense of what was going on and so on and so forth. And there's fantastic resources here in the city, therapists and group meetings and things. And so I went through about 9 months, maybe about a year of relatively intense therapy to, really pull this out, see what was going on, figure out whether I was entertaining a whim or whether I was going to actually do something. And a year later, I went and started on HRT at Mount Sinai Transgender Clinic under Zillow Goldstein. And that was it. That was the beginning of the journey. And so for many years, I let estrogen do its work. I actually found that the world was very accepting. It was very nice. New York City is a good place to be trans, I think. Employers were great. Did all kinds of fun, just had all kinds of fun. And then a few years ago, I forget how many years ago it was, 3 or 4 years ago, I came across an article in a magazine about Dr. Deschamps-Braly and how amazing his work was. And that I was like, well, that's the person I'm going to pay to do my face. I want that.
And were you full-time at that point?
Yeah. I came out full-time, I'd say 2 years after I started. So I went through a year of therapy and like trying to figure out what to do. I went through a year where I started HRT, let it cook. I came out to a few close people. And then in December 2014, I came out at work. I was working for a university at the time. And there were, the most amusing thing about working in the university was when you come out there, they're like, yeah, whatever, you're not the first person this week because of the university, right? And so they're just like, yeah, this is no big deal. And so that was pretty great. Coming out in a safe space, where it was not unusual really to do that. And then I changed employers after, as one does periodically, and everybody's been amazing. So, a few years ago, I finally got to the point in my life where
so after you went full-time, how long was it before you saw this article about facial feminization?
Oh. 3 or 4 years. I forget exactly. I think it was like 2018 or so.
So once you saw that around 2018, how long did it take for you to get the consultation lined up? And then when was your surgery? I'm just trying to get sort of a timeline for everyone.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it was wishful thinking for a good part of it, because as you may know, it's exceedingly difficult to get coverage for this procedure. One of the things that made it possible for me, and do with this what you will, is I started going to work in a tech company that paid super well. And so I finally got to the point where I was like, all right, this is time. And so I reached out to their office in when was that? It was 2018. I reached out, and then of course, there's a relatively long lead time to get a consult. I happened to be in San Francisco in early 2020, before the pandemic, to get contouring surgery with Dr. Scott Mossman. So, as you can imagine, it's kind of amusing. I was out in San Francisco for this procedure, which was great. I had lined it up a bit earlier, and I was able to get a consult sooner with Dr. D. And so I was staying in a hotel around the corner and walk around the block, have consults. It turns out I love them. Like, I love those folks. They're amazing. They're wonderful. We had a great time. I think some of it is that in addition to having a great deal of admiration and respect for Dr. D's skill set, I'm really fascinated by the whole thing, like the technology and the methodology and the thinking and the aesthetic thinking and how you approach the whole thing. And so, we had a lot to talk about. And I'm not squeamish at all. I really dig it. Really dig this stuff. And so I
So
had the
can you
consult,
describe
and
can you describe what the consultation is like for someone from the time you arrive and through the entire
yeah,
thing?
well, yeah, it feels a bit like you're walking into a luxury car dealership at first because everything is so wonderfully put together, and the decor is so nice, and Dee Dee treats you real well up front. But the sort of the nuts and bolts of the procedure of the consultation and whatnot. Once they get some photographs of your profile as you are, then you sit down and Dr. D starts to kind of look over what he's got to work with, and starts making some suggestions and some quick swipes on a, so doing a little bit of visualization in Photoshop, kind of like, yeah, we could do this, we could do that, et cetera. And then going over kind of the process, and then what all of the various and sundry things that can happen are, what specific things happen, how he goes about doing it, and you kind of come away with a sense that you now understand what it is that has to happen in order to achieve the result, and also that things are possible that you may not have imagined. So
Were there any of those for you, like specific things that surprised you?
I think the degree of change was what surprised me. Like how far can you go? And it was further than I expected, which was good because I wanted a lot. And I had a lot of, at first I was thinking that there would be some relatively minor things that could be done, shaving down the backs of jawlines and maybe doing the rhinoplasty and whatnot. But yeah, I think it was just how much can be done was what shocked me and what inspired me, actually. So
yeah, I think
so
seeing some of the examples of his work really is a turning point for a lot of people. And
oh, certainly, yeah, certainly, yeah.
So after the consultation, how long was it again till you had the surgery itself?
COVID happened, so that kind of threw a wrench in things. We had originally planned to do it a couple months out. So I had the consult in late February 2020, and we were going to do it in April. And then COVID happened. So we kind of had to wait and see. July ended up being, because the hospitals were disrupted by the COVID situation, it wasn't until July that we had another window of opportunity. And of course, I was like, we'll take it because COVID has tendency to come back in the wintertime, and who knows what, who knows what was going to go on next. Everything was very fluid. So late July, I went back in for the actual procedure, which was kind of interesting because, it was a ghost town. San Francisco was a ghost town. The hotel I stayed at was boarded up. That was kind of wild. All of Union Square around his office was kind of a Mad Max post-apocalyptic looking kind of place,
Yeah, it was
or
such a strange time
Man or something.
Yeah, very strange time to be in the city doing this kind of thing because, yeah, he was closed down during part of the pandemic by the hospital. Right. And so your timeline may be a little different than someone who's doing it after the pandemic's big waves that we've had so far.
Yeah, when the pandemic becomes like the flu, normal, right. Perennial, then it's not quite such a thing. But yeah, the thing is, it's kind of impressive that even during this time of uncertainty, we were able to do this major medical stuff, and it was fine. If anything, it was nice because it was basically the team and me, and there weren't a whole lot of other people around. So yeah, it was cool. I enjoyed it.
So what procedures did you have done?
Oh goodness, a lot. So if I remember correctly, because I wasn't awake for it. Basically, forehead shave, rhinoplasty. He jacked up my cheekbones with some fat injections, which was pretty great. Lip lift, chin reduction, jawline reduction. I think that was about it. I think that was enough.
Yeah, that's
if there's anything else in there, I don't remember.
And
it's plenty. It's like tear down and gut renovation.
Right. And what is the day of the actual procedures like? Like, can you walk us through what you recall about the day of and the recovery?
I can remember the day of more than I can remember the recovery. So I got up at the crack of dawn, and Wilmer shows up with the limo, which is pretty great. I was staying over near the Castro in the Parker Inn, which is a really nice little B&B. So it picks me up in the morning. You know, I'm good to go. For somebody who didn't have any coffee, actually. Drives over to St. Francis, hang out with us folks for a while. I was working. This was amusing because this might tell you a lot about me. So I'm laying on the gurney in my paper outfit because you know they don't do cloth as much anymore. And they had Wi-Fi at St. Francis, and so I'm sitting there chilling, doing some work because that's how I roll. And the anesthesiologist comes over and starts chatting me up, and we talk about all the fun stuff that we can do with anesthesia. And so the interview went well with that, and then he sets me up with an IP. And Dr. D comes over and is like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "You know, just like starts to drip." And he said, "You might want to put that away." And I am out, just like that. But the morning was fun. Like it was like being, I don't know. It's the nice thing about Dr. D's attitude, and the nice thing about you know the crew is that it feels like you're part of a team, and that you're actually with folks that you can joke around with, talk to. You know, you feel pretty at ease. It's nice. I say this, stone cold sober at the time. I say this as somebody I love people, and I really enjoyed the fact that that the morning of we were all just kind of like hanging out a little bit, getting ready for this, and it was like business as usual for Dr. D because he does this all the time. And for me, I just felt like, yeah, these are people I trust. These are people that I get along with, and I can, it's fine. Like it was fine. And it was chill, and they put me out, and my only disappointment is that I wasn't around to see it because I imagine it was pretty wild, and I would like to have seen it. The recovery was mostly foggy because, of course, apparently I had convinced the anesthesiologist that I needed a lot of anesthesia. So for most of the afternoon, I couldn't tell you what happened. I know that there was a nurse who hung out all night, and I was only vaguely aware of that. But I felt okay. It was a good night. Slept okay. Everything, it wasn't a big deal. And then the next day, I checked out pretty early. Things were fine. They gave me a ride back, which is nice. And it was okay. Being bandaged up was not a big deal. I had plenty of painkillers, so didn't really feel any. I didn't feel bad. And back to work. Quite frankly, went right back to doing my usual.
So that was my next question. Did you take any time off of work, or were you able to work? How soon after you?
Oh, I didn't take it. I took like the half day for the surgery.
I was going to say, if you're working right before surgery, that's a sign that you.
Yeah, I'm not burning a vacation day for that. No, I didn't, because the next day I was fine. Like the next day, I'm sitting in that. Sitting back in my hotel room because I was, during the COVID situation, couldn't do anything else. The most I could do is like take walks outside and get takeout. And so no, I went right back to work. So the thing is that there's not really a lot of pain from this, at least for me. I found that there was very little to worry about. What I did have, I controlled with the drugs I was given. It really wasn't a big deal. I used Soylent as my nutrition of choice, as recommended, and that was okay. I didn't really mind having that for 2 weeks straight. Yeah, it was fine. It was fine. No, was it 2 weeks or 1 week? It wasn't very long because I do remember going to places to get takeout there, like up and down Market Street. So really not a big deal.
And how long after did you feel like you were able to kind of look presentable to other people in terms of, not noticeable bruising and swelling?
Well, that was one of the joys of being in a pandemic, is that nobody really saw me. I don't recall there being any meaningful, like in terms of like bruising or like looking like you'd been really, it wasn't, there was very little of that. Like, I don't recall there being, and I have photos of all this, I guess I could go back and look, but there wasn't a whole lot of damage like that. Mostly what was out of sorts was just, waiting for the skin to catch up with the new shape. But no, it wasn't too bad. I was bandaged for a good part of it, but I was isolated.
Well, one of the things that
So
he's innovated that's different than when I did it 25 years ago is that he's really keen on reducing swelling. So the diet
yeah.
that he suggests, the walking
Hmm.
around shortly after the procedures, staying mobile, all
Hmm.
that kind of stuff, that wasn't part of my recoveries. So do you feel like that helped keep things kind of reasonable in terms of swelling and
Yeah,
discomfort?
seems so. Mhm. Yeah, seems so. I had very little trouble with any of that.
Cool. And then so
But I'm fairly
so for
active.
the
So.
like, what were the next couple of weeks like for you? Did you feel like you could do regular physical activity? Did you feel like you needed to take it easy?
Well, I mean, I wasn't working out because that was no, no running, no weightlifting, that sort of thing. But otherwise, I had a normal life. I flew back after the second week after the follow up, and then and then I had to quarantine for 2 weeks because I came back to New York from a high COVID area, and so most of my life was spent kind of business as usual, minus my usual running around partying craziness, which is fine. But it really didn't slow me down.
Well, it's been interesting. I think the pandemic there was a surge of people who decided to take steps in their transition that they hadn't previously considered.
Right. Yep.
So it was a perfect time for a lot of people to do exactly
Hmm.
that.
Oh
Um,
yes.
One of the questions that people are probably curious about, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, is
Hmm.
paying for this. You mentioned that
Yep.
you worked at a tech company that had very good benefits. I've talked with several other women who had similar situations.
Uh-huh.
What was that process like for you?
Mhm. Well, it wasn't amazing. I started out trying to get it covered by my health insurance company. Of course, they denied it, as they normally do, and went through the appeals process. In the meantime, I had paid out of pocket, which is non-trivial. But one of the reasons I didn't get the surgery sooner was because I needed to get to a point in my life where I could afford to pay out of pocket, that kind of stuff. So I fought and I fought and I fought with the insurance company. I exhausted the appeals process basically, and I went to my employer and said, "Our insurance company is not amazing about this. What can we do? Can you give me some? Can you give me some support to try and make them cover some or all of this?" And I work for an employer that's pretty fantastic, and they said, "Screw it. Here, have a check." And so they made me whole, as it were. But that's rare. That's extremely rare. So I think that in terms of financing these things, until there's meaningful insurance reform, it's going to be challenging for a lot of people who aren't making tech money.
Yeah, I had to pay entirely out of pocket, never got any reimbursements, and it really
Mm-hmm.
hasn't changed much in all this time for most people,
Right.
which is really
Right.
terrible. But for those who are privileged and lucky enough to have these opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully your example will give them a little inspiration to push back a little and keep trying, because sometimes you'll get
Yeah.
a no, but you have to just keep asking.
Yeah. There's been some recent. I thought there was some recent lawsuits affecting Blue Cross or something that had changed the landscape a little bit in terms of procedural coverage for transition. So it may simply be a matter of time before these things are covered, but it's not easy right now.
Right. So tell me a little bit about your general impressions of Dr. D. I think a lot of people, he's a bit mysterious to the general public. So how would you describe him?
I don't know. He's my kind of people. So I understand the description, but if you appreciate the aesthetic, if you appreciate aesthetics, if you appreciate focus and art and detail and crafting and the study of it, and sort of that quiet focus that you need in order to perform at a high level, then you understand Dr. D. So I have a tremendous, obviously I have a tremendous amount of respect for that, but also as a person, I'm really fond of him. He's very warm. He's quiet, but he's very warm. And that was one thing that came through at every meeting that I had. So it definitely puts you at ease, but it's just that quiet focus.
Yeah, it really does put you at ease. And, I think with this kind of aesthetic surgery, that the physician's aesthetic is extremely important. And that when you're speaking with different surgeons and making a decision, you really have to take that into consideration, because every surgeon has a slightly different aesthetic. There are a couple people here in LA who kind of do an LA kind of look, and there's people elsewhere who do other kinds of looks. So it's really important that you find the person who matches your own aesthetic and your own sensibilities.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That was definitely something that was represented well in his general, just his general style choices. How he chooses to decorate his office, books on his shelf, the attitude he has, just general things. Yeah, it's evident. So I agree. You need to find somebody that resonates with you.
And so just to sort of wrap up, like, what would you say as advice to someone who's considering this, and what they should look for when they're making their own decision?
In terms of selection?
Yeah, I think, because we've been very fortunate to be in a position where we could make these choices. What would you say to someone who is in a similar position, who maybe was going to consult with a couple of different people? What should they look for? What should they ask? That kind of thing.
Getting your face remade is one of the most important things that you may choose to do to yourself. Also one of the most amazing things that you may choose to do yourself. It is not an area to go quickly into. So you need to know up front kind of what you're after. So it's important to know what you want when you get started. It is not okay to roll the dice. So first you have to know that, what you want, kind of where you want to go. You need to be able to communicate that to whoever you talk to, because you're going to want that candidate surgeon to be able to answer, yeah, that's reasonable. That's something I do, whatevs. By extension, because this is one of the most significant changes you can make to yourself, and certainly one that's exceedingly difficult to hide if you don't like it, you cannot take shortcuts with the process or with who you choose. This is one of those times where you have to pick the best of the best. And if you take a shortcut because you're desperate, it can be challenging later. And revisions, while possible, are not amazing. So this is something you need to get right the first time if you can. Take your time. You need to find somebody that, even if you don't like them, if you feel like you can trust them to do the work to the way that you want it done, then that's your guide star for this. Now, I happen to be extremely fond of the people that I worked with. I'm very lucky in that regard. But even if Dr. D and I weren't super compatible socially, I trust that he would have done the work, that he would have done an amazing job even then. But as it turns out,
that trust is really the key.
Right. So trust the process, have faith in the skills of the person that you choose. And if you don't find that you have that faith in that person, then maybe you need to keep looking for someone who is. And then, the money is a factor, and that's an unavoidable factor. But first, go through the process of getting a consult. When the bill comes down as to how much it's going to cost you to do it, then try and deal with that separately. But you need to go ahead and start the process to understand what it is that you need to know what's possible. Because if you just sit around going, well, that's too expensive, I can't afford it, you may miss out on opportunities where you can, or where you can make something work.
Yeah.
Maybe the number of procedures you need in order to achieve the goal you want is fewer than you expect. Yeah. You just don't know. That's why you talk to a professional.
Right. Yeah, I had to do it in two separate procedures because about a year apart, because I just didn't have the money. And
Right.
that compromise wasn't ideal, but that was just how I had to do it. So
Yep.
you
make it
just have
work.
to, yeah, where there's a will, there's a way. And you can't hit a target that doesn't exist. So I
That's
totally
right.
agree that it's important to get the consultation, find out what your goal is, and then try
Mhm.
working towards that goal.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, do you have any final thoughts or any last things to impart as far as wisdom regarding facial feminization and
So there's a lot to be, so facial feminization is often put in the bucket of aesthetics, cosmetic surgery for the sake of cosmetic surgery, for the sake of, meeting sort of social norms. It's not that. There's part of it that is that, but it's life changing. I have never felt better about myself, or more confident, or safer, or more authentic than I have since having my face remade by Dr. D. So at the beginning of the call, I've never been happier. I have, my life has changed completely in ways that are amazing. My dating life picked up, which is always a big win. I've started modeling in ways that are kind of interesting and unusual. And I just, like, everything is better. Everything is better. It really is such a huge quality of life improvement. It is hard to understate just how significant it is. Because once you have this surgery and you are no longer feeling so dysphoric when you look in the mirror, all of these other factors in your life kind of fall into place. And anxiety has dissipated, depression has been much less, almost really not at all. And I just, moving through the world is so much more enjoyable and so much nicer when I can present my face to random people and not fear that I'm going to be clocked, or that I'm just gonna, it puts an end to the awkwardness that holds us back. And now this confidence, this power and authenticity, everything's changing for me. It really has been the difference between 7 years or however many, 6 years of kind of wandering in the wilderness and really just coming into my own and being someone who's fully realized.
yeah,
And life is amazing.
Yeah, this is the best investment I ever made in my life, period, end of story. Because everybody sees it every day.
Exactly. Yeah. And like it or not, it forms the basis of who we are to so many people.
It's true. Well, this has been really wonderful. I'm so glad that you were able to take some time, and I'm sure this will be very helpful for some people who are considering it. So,
cool beans.
So thanks.